I heard Star Wars was on some slanted roofs and it was unsafe. So
Yes.
It's very sad. Very sad.
Mr. Kadish, we've to be serious this whole show is serious. This is a serious fake funeral on YouTube, so it should be treated as such. But we saw the finale of The Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
I think we witnessed some say a murder. There was a trial last year where Disney and Lucasfilm were tried, and I stand by the results of that trial. But we really witnessed the end of this franchise with that final episode of The Acolyte. Do you have something to say to us about what you've witnessed?
Well, yes, I have a eulogy I'd like to give, if at all possible.
Please, we'd like to hear it.
All right. You have to excuse me. I'm a little bit emotional right now, but I'll try my best to get through this. I want to thank you all for being here today. I know Star Wars would appreciate it, seeing everyone who cared enough to show up. You wouldn't know it now, but there was a time when Star Wars loved its fans and cared about what they thought. And if it were still alive, it would probably be very happy to see so many of you actually still cared enough to be here for its funeral. I have a lot of fond memories with Star Wars. We grew up together, had the same love of science fiction and science fantasy. We loved the Force. We loved the Jedi. Star Wars was my only English-speaking friend when my family was stationed in Germany back when I was in kindergarten. I love Star Wars so much that I brought it back to the States with me when my family moved back to the good old US of A. As I got older, I played with more Star Wars' toys. I read Star Wars' books. Yes, I bet a lot of you didn't know Star Wars was a prolific author and even made its own comic books. Star Wars also was a filmmaker, making a variety of TV shows in the form of cartoons. It's because of Star Wars that I wanted to become a filmmaker, and to make something even half as good as Star Wars did was the ultimate goal in my life. As I got older, I realized that there was new stuff Star Wars was making that wasn't quite as good as it had been when I was a kid. But whatever, bad Star Wars is much like bad pizza. Even if it were bad, it was still good enough. But then something happened that changed everything. Star Wars met a girl by the name of Kathleen. At first, I was happy for Star Wars. This girl seemed really cool. She'd been with other big franchises in the past, and those franchises were all classics, so she must have been a real catch, right? Star Wars seemed happy. But then, a few years after being with Kathleen, things started to change. I noticed Star Wars wanted to hang out with new friends. Some guys named JJ, Ryan, Lord, Miller, Howard, Favreau, whatever. I wasn't mad, but I could feel us slowly growing apart. And it was sad, but it happens. Then I noticed that Kathleen was changing Star Wars. It was no longer the cool franchise I met when I was a kid that everyone could enjoy. It had become a staunch feminist. It had become overtly political. It had disowned so many of the books and comics that it had created. It had unfriended so many of the people who cared about it growing up. But thanks to Kathleen's influence, it didn't just unfriend its old family. Star Wars actively began to despise us. It began to fall under the influence of left-wing radicals, lesbians, and worst of all, people with extremely bad taste in movies and TV shows. Yes, Kathleen had successfully Yoko'd Star Wars. But those of us who still love Star Wars held out hope. Star Wars had always been about redemption. No matter how bad things got, there was always a path back to the light. And we who cared about Star Wars were still willing to accept him should he ever come back around. But then, a former assistant to Harvey Weinstein entered the picture. Another radical feminist lesbian championed by Kathleen. Someone with so little writing talent that I'm convinced she must have had some type of blackmail against Disney executives in order to get her job. This woman's name was Leslie. And like her former boss, she abused and victimized Star Wars. Her lack of understanding about Star Wars is what made it special is heartbreaking. But even worse was her sheer lack of understanding about how fire works. Yes, the element of fire. how it needs oxygen to burn, how rocks and metal aren't flammable. If ever there was someone who needed a man around to mansplain things to her, it was Leslie. And now our beloved Star Wars is gone. Gone forever. Betrayed and murdered by the women it thought loved him. Star Wars died on Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. I wish I could say it passed away peacefully, but it died a turbulent and violent death. And in the end, it died of cringe. And according to Kathleen, it's the fault of all the men who loved it. But I know that I, for one, will miss Star Wars. Though we had a troubled relationship at the end of its life, I still have fond memories of the good times, of how it was before Kathleen lured it to the DEI side, of all the generations of men it inspired, including me. And that is why I am voting for Donald Trump in November. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and may the force be with you.
Brilliant.
Bravo, man. Bravo.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
See, you say murder. I say it's more like, Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie Helen, they basically threw Star Wars up on that pinball machine like Jodie Foster and The Accused and had their way with it.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Thank you so much,
Matt. You have a critic in the audience in the chat. Kathleen Kennedy for 10.
Oh, let's go back to that.
Yes, thank you. Kathleen Kennedy for 10. Kadish wants me. It's cool. Star Wars will still die.
Yeah, some were saying you want to.
It's already dead. So
some say that you want
resurrected
to
and then killed again.
I don't know.